Hello, thank you for joining us today. My name is Aidan Sullivan and I am the Vice President of Photo Assignments at Getty Images. Behind every image there's a story, and whether that story is told by a Getty Images photographer, filmmaker or editor, one constant remains, the passion we all share for all types of imagery. For the next podcast in our ongoing series, Matthew Butson, who is the Vice President of the Hulton Archive, speaks with Ernst Haas, the son of the world-renowned photographer Ernst Haas. Throughout his career, Ernst Haas demonstrated time and time again that he was indeed the master of all forms of photography. From post-war photojournalism to abstract images, his art could not be ignored. And when he moved to the United States, he took the industry by storm as he virtually pioneered the world of color photography. In the summer of 2010, 2 new books will be published featuring his work. To mark this occasion, we thought it pertinent to talk to someone who knew him best, his son, to share insights about Ernst Haas and his career behind the lens.
Thank you for coming, Alex.
Thank you.
So if I start right at the beginning and his early days in Vienna, where he was born, did he ever discuss those early days with you and sort of growing up in what was war-torn annexed country during the war?
They went through a pretty hard time during the war in Vienna, and my father was not much of a complainer, but I heard a few stories about what it was like during those days. His father was Jewish, and because of that, it made his life a little difficult in terms of schooling and any kind of artistic endeavors and so on, so he sort of suffered through that a little bit.
So he originally studied medicine, didn't he? He went to medical school. So why photography and not medicine? Did he always know he wants to be a photographer?
Well, he figured that after the war, he should do something sort of humanitarian. And so he thought, well, what could I do to help people? And so he started studying medicine, but not being a very good student. And this is coming from him. I'm not being the judge here. He basically realized that this was not really what he was meant to do, and basically sort of realized that he had an artistic interest, but didn't really know what to do with it because there were no opportunities in post-war Vienna at the time, and basically would spend his time just reading philosophy books and going to museums until his brother, being fed up with this kid lying around reading books and going to museums, said, "What do you want to do with your life?" And he said, "Well, I like art and I like traveling, so maybe I should become a photographer."
So he originally went to work for some magazines, didn't he? Hoyt and I think Film magazine. How did that come about?
Inge Morath, who was a close friend of his and a magnum photographer later on, the two of them worked together. My father would photograph the stories, and she would write the text for them. And she had known Warren Trabant, who I believe was the editor of Hoyt, and she sort of introduced the two, and from there stories became available, and Hoyt published them.
His first major story was the prisoner of war returning from Russia in 1949, and that was published in Hoyt. So how did Life pick that up?
Well, I think it was for the time, a pretty amazing story. And Warren Trabant, who was the editor of Hoyt, knew everyone from Kappa to, I think it was Wilson Hicks, who was the editor at Life magazine. So they all spoke to each other, and the story sort of exploded, and everybody wanted it. And suddenly my father was very much in demand.
And that shoot was completely unplanned, wasn't it? That was luck, being in the right place at the right time.
Exactly right. I mean, my father initially, when he started photographing, was doing much more sort of pastoral photographs of the countryside in Austria or abstracts in Vienna, that sort of thing. And when he did visit Warren Trabant at Hoyt, he said, maybe you should do something a little bit more realistic about what's going around your life and around what's going on in Vienna. And he was supposed to do a fashion shoot on a particular day, and realized that there were all these people at the train station, and just kind of skipped the job and went to the train station and ended up with this story, which is a good thing because it made his career.
Absolutely. So he moved to New York in, I think, 1951. So
That's right.
Bearing in mind what you said earlier, I presume that was an easy move, or was it a wrench to leave his home?
I don't think so. I think it's all a call for color. He moved to Paris to be at Magnum in 1949. And then from there, it was obvious that he always wanted to go to the States, and this is where things were going to happen in the future, and that's where he wanted to be.
So his next big break and breakthrough moment probably was the Life feature in, I think, 1953, Magic of the City story. So that was the first colour feature published in Life?
That was the first complete story. I think it was spread out on 2 separate issues in color for Life magazine. Yes, it was quite a revolutionary thing for them to do.
And I know it was really difficult at that time, technically in terms of processing and film. What sort of technical barriers do you think he had to overcome?
Well, the film Kodachrome had only, I think, just come out a few years prior in 35 millimeter. So there was the barrier of the ASA, which I think was 12 or 24. So you really had to have a very steady hand to photograph, or everything looked blurred, which ended up being something that he used
trademark, yes.
to his advantage later on. But for the New York story, I think Kodak gave him a bunch of film, and he just went out shooting and presented it to Life, and they flipped over it and said, "Wow, this is amazing. This is the future, and we have to publish this."
So the next, I think, landmark was the Museum of Modern Art show in 1962. Can you remember how the show was received?
I wasn't around at that time, but from what I've heard and what I understood was that it was quite an event. I mean, it was really the first time that an entire show. I mean, there were a few black and white images in there, but it was mostly color, and it was quite revolutionary for the time. And the press was very favorable, and there was very good criticism about it, and it was really a breakthrough. And I know a lot of color photographers back then were completely influenced by it and are still today, and attribute that exhibition as the reason either they became photographers, color photographers.
So I know he's a pioneer of what we call the dye transfer process, and without getting too technical here, what was it that this gave to Ernst Haas as opposed to maybe other processes?
Well, I'm not sure there were that many other processes at the time. The thing with dye transfer is that it allows for very rich color without it turning garish. It's a very labor-intensive process, and you have a lot of possibilities of interpretation in it. But the thing that appealed to my father was the richness and the depth of color that you could attain with it, which is sort of the opposite of what sort of contemporary photography is doing today.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Ernst's work today, and those punchy colours are almost like a trademark of his work.
That's right. Well, I mean, it was a combination of the Kodachrome film and the Kodak paper and dye transfer process.
So, again, harking back maybe something you said earlier about the grey days, and I know Ernst obviously continues to shoot in black and white for various stories and other features, but did he feel he'd gone as far as he'd go with the medium of black and white, or was it, going back to what you said, purely that he preferred to work in colour?
He always loved black and white. I mean, that's what he started with, but his medium was color, for sure.
So, I mean, segueing into working with celebrities, certainly on film sets, did he enjoy that kind of work and that environment?
Yes, he did. Ernst was the set photographer on many classic movies such as West Side Story and The Third Man and Little Big Man and The Misfits, etc. I think he was on about 40 or 45 pretty major movies. My father was very discreet with his friendships with all these movie stars, and he was very close to many of them, like Yul Brynner and Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman and Audrey Hepburn, and he was always invited to their houses and took photographs of their weddings and was part of the family in many cases. And being very discreet was the reason why he remained close friends with them for all his life. He knew what to do, knew how to do it well, and did not have to get in anybody's way or step on anybody's shoes to get what he had to be done. He was very confident about his talent and how to get results.
And I know he shot advertising shoots a number of times over the years. Did he enjoy shooting advertising jobs?
I think he was always up for a challenge and had an incredible work ethic and and realized that it's one thing to do books like The Creation. It's another thing to think that they're going to sell enough to be able to make a living from them. So he was realistic, and he had a family to support, so he did what he had to do to pay the bills. But I don't think he minded at all. It was hard work, but he enjoyed the challenge, and they enjoyed his company, and it worked both ways.
Was he given much creative freedom, or was he on a tight rein, or did it really depend on the job?
I think it depended on the job, but I think he knew pretty well how to read his clients and what they needed. And also, he would take any opportunity, be it being on a movie set or being on an advertising shoot, to, while there was downtime, photograph for himself. During the Misfits, instead of waiting around for Marilyn Monroe to show up, he would just hire a Jeep and a driver and shoot horses. Some of the classic Ernst Haas photographs of abstractions and so on came from these inadvertent moments in working on an advertising shoot or a movie set.
So you just picked on a word there, but the abstract work that he went on to do, I mean, obviously hugely pioneering and possibly well ahead of his time in many respects. Do you know what he was trying to achieve here, or was it purely art for art's sake?
Ernst initially wanted to be a painter, and I think what one sees in his abstract work is his pure artistic side, which is the side that interests me the most, and which is the side that interests curators today the most, which was way ahead of its time. It's only now being understood and discovered.
I think what's fascinating with Ernst Haas was the fact he was, always pushing himself and trying to get to the next level and do something different. Ernst sadly passed away in 1986, I think, so that's almost 25 years ago now. Do you think his legacy endures and will endure?
I don't think there's any possibility that I couldn't. I mean, he's obviously an historically relevant photographer who's done incredible work, and it's here to stay. And all this interest that's happening right now, I think, is proof that his legacy is important and enduring.
This might seem a very obvious question, but sometimes it can be quite insightful. Did Ernst have a favorite image or a favorite shoot?
There's a photograph that I know he particularly liked, and I think it embodies a lot of him. Oddly enough, it's called Holy Underwear. It's an abstraction of an underwear that was left in a desert somewhere, which he photographed, and it looks like the cross. And it's an abstraction, but in it is his figure-8 composition sign. He used to say that in most of his photographs you can find the figure-8, the infinity sign, in the composition of the photograph. This one has it pretty prevalent. And the fact that it's an abstraction, the fact that it has a spiritual connotation is very much about him.
So we've talked about the different phases of Ernst's career and also the very different types of photography that he mastered. Do you think he suffered by being this sort of master of all? Rather than sort of specialising in one area. I know he specialised in colour, but obviously, he had all these different strings to his bow.
Yes, absolutely. I think the fact that he was a virtuoso in so many fields made it very difficult for people to put him in a certain category. Photographers have made careers out of 6 months of his career, or just one series of his photographs. So in that sense, yes, I think he was very good at a lot of things, and being that way is difficult to pinpoint somebody, and in those terms, it's tough to be remembered because of that.
So you've been overlooking this legacy for quite a while now, and I know in 1996 you joined Getty Images. In terms of we signed Ernst Haas. Obviously, in those days, Getty Images was a fledgling organisation. Why did you join us?
Well, I joined Getty Images because I met Mark and Jonathan, and they seemed excited to represent Ernst, and I was excited to see somebody excited. So we made that happen, and here we are, 13 years later.
Fantastic. Well, I think all I'd like to do now is thank Alex, certainly for giving us a valuable insight into the life and times of really one of the true giants of 20th century photography, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.